Hey everyone, hi, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm doing a retrospective on the year 2005 in which I take you through all of the things that I've read from 2005, all of the things that I want to read from 2005. Steve Donahue, my favorite book critic here in the universe. I go through his best and worst books of that year and we just talk everything 2005. So if you're enjoying my channel, I would encourage you to subscribe if you would like. Maybe like the video. There are so many bad books this year though. I'm gonna tell you right now, I don't have a lot of nice things to say about what was published in 2005 or really what I have read from what is published in 2005. So we're going with that, and yeah, let's just go ahead and get into the meat of this video. Let's talk about some notable books that made an indelible impression on the literary world, but also books that I haven't read. We'll get into the books that I have read from 20 years ago. It's a train wreck, y'all. So the first of the books that I have not read is The Lightning Thief, Percy Jackson's and the Olympians #1 by Rick Riordan, I think his name is. So here's the deal. Very recently, a student of mine who is now, 12 or 13, her favorite book series is the Percy Jackson series. And I continue to meet young people where this is their in to reading. And I think it's so interesting when books, still have a lasting impression, especially on young people 20 years later. The next is Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close by Jonathan Safran Foer. I think, if I'm remembering correctly, this is one of the first post 9/11 books. I remember my little sister loved this book though, and she's not necessarily a reader. Not that I want to categorize her in one way or another, but she's not a big reader and she loved this book. And I think she read it in high school. Yeah. And then the last of these notable books that I haven't read is A Feast of Crows by George R.R. Martin, which is the #4 in the Song of Ice and Fire series, a series that I wonder if it will ever be finished. I have a feeling not, but people were going bananas over the Song of Ice and Fire series back then. We're going to talk about the books that I have read, and I'm sad to say that there's not a lot of favorites of mine. I'm not like, oh yeah, that was such a juicy, good, and amazing book. A lot of them are not great, and we're going to start at the bottom. So we're starting off with Looking for Alaska by John Green. John Green had a YouTube channel. He started off as a YouTuber, became an author, and I think this is what put him on the map. This is a book about, I think, kids going to summer camp and falling in love with a manic pixie dream girl. And it's sad, as most John Green books were back then. Now he's writing nonfiction, and it really is what launched his, what I think put him on the map as a writer. And then I think a lot of people, I don't know, it's so funny. He's got a very split audience because every once in a while I'll be like, John Green, the YouTuber, and people are like, I didn't know that John Green had a YouTube channel. And then I'll be like, John Green, the writer, and they're like, I didn't know John Green, the YouTuber, was a writer. So his audience is very, they live in different spots on, I guess on the internet or in the world, because some people just have no idea about his, other career. Anyways, the next book was The Uglies by Scott Westerfield. This book wasn't bad, but it was definitely a book that was post-apocalyptic. That was the thing back then, writing a post-apocalyptic type of book, or a book in a dystopian society. That's really what it was. We were all about the dystopian books back then, and this is about the perfecting of our looks, and whether you at a certain age were going to have a surgery in which you perfected your looks. It's something like that. And so it calls into question beauty standards. This ended up being a series, and, trolla. I don't know. I remember people, on the internet, probably I found out about the Uglies series on the internet. I'm pretty sure I did. And people were like, it's so good. It's so amazing. And just like with everything on the internet, but with younger Shelley back then, I didn't realize I didn't understand how to parse out what I think I would like versus what was just hype. And this to me was mostly hype with very little substance. That's kind of where I'm at. More recently though, I didn't learn my lesson about hype, and I read Twilight by Stephanie Meyer, the Twilight book. It was so over the top. you know, it was so over the top. So it's fine. I have a whole video about my thoughts on Twilight. Then we kind of get into this section where I'm like, these books were okay. There were strengths and weaknesses, but overall, nothing that I loved. So one of them was Blink, The Power of Thinking Without Thinking by Malcolm Gladwell. I have a very on and off relationship with Malcolm Gladwell. Sometimes I think that he has wisdom, and other times I just vitriolically disagree with his opinions. Then we also have Teacher Man by Frank McCourt, which is the third book in his in his set of writing memoirs. Okay, everybody knows Angela's Ashes. When I read Teacher Man, I was becoming a teacher for the first time, and I wanted books about being a teacher, so this was recommended to me, and it was fine, but as a new teacher, it wasn't very encouraging, and I don't think it's supposed to be. I think it's supposed to be about Frank McCourt's life and learning how to be a teacher, but it doesn't have this bend of being like, you got this, like, it's hard, but totally worth it, which I think I needed at the time, and so this didn't land very well for me. I also read The History of Love by Nicole Krauss, which is an odd book. It's a very weird book. It's a book about a book that exists but also doesn't exist, and this manuscript, but it's also following the story of a person as well. I don't remember a lot from it because I probably read it not quite 20 years ago, but I probably read it 15 years ago, and I just remember being like, that was a book. That was a book. A book that I didn't finish but was really, really good, but I didn't finish it because it was too sad, and it was The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion. I just thought, I didn't quite realize that it was about the grief of losing her husband, and my heart was like broken up about it, and so I've always meant to return to it. I just haven't yet. Then, maybe controversial opinion that this isn't my number one book because people love it so much, and It's Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. Everyone says this is the best dystopian book out there, and in 2005, dystopian books were having such a moment. So I wonder, I don't know, I'm sure Kazuo Ishiguro was working on this book for decades, and then finally it came out in 2005, and it was the most like subtle and it's like one of the most subtle dystopian books out there and eerily unsettling. I just didn't think there was anything to write home about. I don't know. I was like, oh yeah, okay, like that's the direction you took it. Cool. Cool, I guess. But I wasn't like blown away by it. And I know that that's not everybody's experience. There are so many people who love this book and they like, it's one of their best of all time, and they're totally blown away by it, and so on and so forth. Okay, the next book, The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls. The interesting thing is that I have loved this book. I've loved this memoir. It's about a young woman growing up in an extremely dysfunctional family. She has extremely dysfunctional parents. And the way that she like beats the odds, gets out of that situation. But a lot of it has to do with her extremely impoverished childhood and just the amount of the extreme dysfunction her parents were living at the time, and I think still are in some ways. Her father has passed, but I'm sure her mother, I think her mother still has some issues. Point is, though, when I read this years ago, I read it twice, and I thought it was really compelling, really interesting. And then I saw Olive, who had read it way more recently than I have. Olive at a book Olive that was angry at the book and said that, you know, we need to be thinking about these children and how they grew up, and the wrong that their situation was, and the dangers that their parents put them in. And she was angry at the parents for putting the children in the situations that they were in. And then also like the way that Jeanette Walls writes about her childhood, there's almost like this light air to it. Like, it's okay. Like we ended up getting through it, or it just ended up having sort of a writing off dangerous situations in these moments, right? So I thought it was really, and then she was kind of like not mad, but like it was upsetting to Olive to read about these really harmful and dangerous and abusive situations, and then having the author not have that reflection of like, that was really damaging, or that was wrong. That was it just saying straight out, that is wrong of my parents to have put us through, me and my siblings, through those situations. And then to cycle back around with some sort of reflection. It doesn't really have that. It just is like, well, that was a horrible thing that happened and we got through it. Tra-la, tra-la. And so then after her review, I was like, oh yeah, that is true. I was like, oh yeah. You're probably right on that. So I don't know if this will stand up, and knowing that, Olive's honest critique is sort of living in my head rent-free for this book. I don't know if it would rank as high as it does if I reread the book, but at the time I really liked it. Then we have The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Stieg Larsson. This is a fun book. This is all about a reporter trying to crack a case and, expose the evils in the world. And he is paired up with, or sort of through a series of a bunch of events, he is paired up with this rebellious, tech savvy, plays by her own kind of rules kind of girl. So or kind of woman, she's I think she's, young, but definitely maybe in her 20s kind of thing. I liked it. I thought this was a really great read. I've also read this far more recently, so, I can say that this is more aligned with my, with my own taste now. Definitely a thriller, definitely has some, some scenes in which Stieg Larsson really gets in there and describes it's a revenge book. I don't know. It's good. Okay. So, and then the last book, the one that ranks the highest, is The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. This is an extremely cleverly written book, about World War II. And we're following a young woman, and that young woman she goes through so much. But she also has a love for books. And it's both, it's both that she has all this tragedy in her life, because I think we might be in Germany during this book. I might be wrong on that, but we're with this young woman and tragedy faces her, and yet, she finds comfort in the love of books. So that's always been, I have loved that book. I do love that book. I should probably, again, reread it. So next on my list is books on my physical TBR, one of which is kind of like my husband and my book. It's our book, which I didn't even grab, but it's Consider the Lobster and Other Essays by David Foster Wallace. Ted and I together read Infinite Jest, and we really enjoyed our conversations from it. We really enjoyed the read. It was just one of those books that stands out because it took us both so long to read it, and we read it together at the same time. So it was like, where are you at? What do you think about this part? And it just gave us grounds to have really fun and fascinating conversations. And so David Foster Wallace has a little space in my heart for, I don't know, being able to write something that we were able to converse about for weeks and weeks and weeks on time, over a large amount of time. Weeks and weeks and weeks at a time, that's what I was going to say. So that's the only book from 2005 on my physical TBR that I can name right now. And then on my mental TBR, a book that a lot of you said that I would love is The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova. I like historical fiction, and this is recommended to me every once in a while. Another historical fiction book that I would like to read is A Long, Long Way by Sebastian Barry. I recently read, what is it? Days Without End by Sebastian Barry, and it is about an Irishman living in America a few hundred years ago, and how he makes it through the frontier, the Western frontier, and all the different jobs he has, and it's a really touching book. So A Long, Long Way, I think, is part of that series, and so I do want to get to it at some point. And then the last one is Curtis Settenfield's Prep. I just finished Rodham by Settenfield, and I really enjoyed her writing, and Prep is about a preparatory school, which sounds right up my alley. This is also her most known book, and so I would love to read, her most hailed work. If we're going through prizes, in terms of prizes, the Nobel Prize for Literature was given to Harold Pittner, who is a British dramatist. The Orange Prize for Fiction went to Lionel Shriver. We need to talk about Kevin. I just saw Daniel at Guilty Feet roast this book, so I do not want to read it. I will leave Daniel's video down below. He roasted this book, and it was hard to argue with, although I haven't read the book or anything. The Man Booker Prize went to John Banville's The Sea. The Hugo Prize for Best Novel went to Susanna Clarke's Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. I should have added this to my TBR list because I own this on my Kindle. Ted's read it, I have it, and I do want to read it. And then the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction was awarded to Marilyn Robinson's Gilead, which I've read, and it is such a good book. Talk about a quiet book, but not like Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. This is a quiet book that has so much wisdom in it, and it has no, it is not haughty in any way. There's nothing about it that is over the top or self-indulgent. It's just so quiet and perfect. Let's end with Steve Donahue's best books of 2005, and I'll start with his 10 nonfiction books. The Emperor of Japan, Meiji and His World, 1852 to 1912 by Donald Keene. This is the extremely readable biography of the great yet elusive Japanese emperor who shaped much of Japan as they entered the 20th century. Postwar by Tony Judt. This actually made it to the New York Times Best 100 Books of the 21st Century, so far. And so it's funny to see this book pop up on Steve's list. This is a monumental one-volume history of Europe in the wake of the Second World War. Bess of Hardwick by Amy Lovell. This is a book about the power broker and jailer of Mary, Queen of Scots. Fascinating topic. Emerson, Mind on Fire by Richard D. Richardson, which is a biography about Ralph Waldo Emerson. The Nature of Sacrifice, which is a biography of Charles Russell Lowell Jr. by Carol Bundy. So Steve mentions that he didn't think that Charles Russell Lowell Jr. could ever have a biography since he died before his 30th birthday in the American Civil War, but he says Carol Bundy does this near miraculous fleshing out of this young man's amazing full life and giving it a very touching resonance for all its brevity. Sounds amazing. The Great War for Civilization by Robert Fisk. This is an enormous book detailing with vivid novelistic efficiency the long brewing and incredibly complex cultural conflict between Islam and civilization. High Noon in the Cold War by Max Frankel. This is a story about President Kennedy and the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Beatles by Bob Spitz, a biography about the famous rock band, The Beatles. One of my favorites. Here in 2025, a biography of Mark Twain is definitely gaining traction, but Steve Donahue recommends a book that came out in 2005, Mark Twain by Ron Powers. A book that is no stranger to Civil War buffs and its team of rivals by Doris Kearns Goodwin, which is about Abraham Lincoln and the Civil War, and I've heard really amazing things about this, so I'm happy to see that it's popped up as Steve's #1 pick of nonfiction for this year. Here's where I really get into trouble, the fiction section. The first being Map of Lost Lovers by Nadeem Aslam. This is a beautifully written novel that concerns a pair of Pakistani immigrants in a small English town who suddenly go missing. It's about a police investigation that is following what happened to these people, and I am going to get overexcited about a book that I don't need. Central Europe by William Vollmann is next, which is a sprawling historical novel centering a wide cast of characters immediately before, during, and after the Second World War. Another American Civil War novel, and it's March by E.L. Doctorow, which is about the Union of General Sherman's March to the Sea, a campaign that was very well researched by the author. A weird book that I've never heard of but sounds really intriguing. Please Don't Come Back from the Moon by Dean Bakopoulos. So this place it's taking place in the suburb of Detroit, a seemingly normal place in which the husbands and fathers suddenly begin disappearing, leaving notes mentioning that they're going to the moon. But regardless of their destination, their old neighborhood is thrown into chaos, with the womenfolk forced to solely rely on themselves to raise their kids. Okay, and one of the book's main characters is a smart young man who grows up in that manless world. Wow, this is kind of like I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman, but a different take on it. Sounds amazing. Next up is The Sea by John Banville. This is about a middle-aged man named Max who's returning to the seaside town where he spent many of his summers as a boy. And it sounds like he is diving back into his memories and trying to confront the grief that he's feeling for a loss that he's had in his life. Another great title. I think Steve was picking out books with amazing titles, and it's called The 7 Types of Ambiguity by Elliot Perlman. This is about a young boy who may or may not have been briefly abducted by the ex-boyfriend of his mother. Next, we have Arthur and George by Julian Barnes. This is a historical novel that has Sir Arthur Conan Doyle as one of the main characters. Next up is The Brothers Bishop by Bart Yates. This is about 2 small-town brothers, one light, carefree, and sexually promiscuous, the other dark, brooding, and sexually inhibited, come together in adulthood to confront their personal issues. Ooh, I like a brother's story. I just do. So this sounds really good. Another book with another amazing title and an absurd premise. A Short History of Tractors in Ukrainian. This is by Marina Lowicka. This is about a retired widower from Ukraine who becomes sexually infatuated with a buxom younger woman. He swears he's in love and begins lavishing his love with presents, and thereby unites his 2 daughters who attempt to put aside their mutual dislike in order to save their father from himself. That sounds absurd and kind of amazing. And then the final book is a book that I already mentioned, and it is Steve Donahue's #1 book for 2005, and it is The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. It is such a good book. It is so emotional and so wonderful. So if you've not read the book and you're like, I wonder if that would be good, just know that this might be your cue. This might be the little nudge that you needed in order to finally pick up The Book Thief, because it is well worth it. All right, well, that was 2005. Thank you for letting me gush. Please let me know what you've read, what you recommend, because I need to read some good books from 2005, because I mostly had books that I didn't like. So please let me know. Maybe it was just a weak publishing year. Okay, wrap it up. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you, and I hope to see you all in my next one.